I watched my stepsister Maya slip into my black dress, the one I died in, and I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing. She thought she was stealing my spotlight again. She had no idea she was walking into her own funeral. The dress looked different on her. Wrong. In my past life, I'd worn it to the charity gala where I'd met my death, poisoned by the champagne Maya herself had handed me with that sweet, sisterly smile. I'd clutched at my throat, collapsed on the marble floor, and died surrounded by Hong Kong's elite, while Maya comforted our mother with crocodile tears. But that was 6 months ago in another timeline. This time, I knew better. This time, I wore red. The crimson silk clung to my body like liquid fire, custom made by a designer whose name Maya couldn't even pronounce. I'd spent 3 hours getting ready, my hair swept up in an elegant chignon, my makeup dramatic and bold. I looked like someone who belonged in the spotlight. I looked like someone who couldn't be killed. Maya's face when she saw me was almost worth dying for. "Iris," she hissed, her knuckles white around her clutch. "You said you weren't coming." "I changed my mind," I said, adjusting the diamond bracelet on my wrist. Real diamonds this time, not the cubic zirconia pieces I'd worn in my previous life when I'd still been stupid enough to believe family meant something. My stepmother Linda appeared behind Maya, her face tight with barely concealed rage. "That dress is completely inappropriate. You look like a prostitute." I smiled. In my past life, that comment would have sent me running to the bathroom in tears. Now it just made me check my lipstick in my compact mirror. "Thank you, Linda. I was going for unforgettable." Seems like I nailed it. The muscles in her jaw twitched. She'd aged since I'd last seen her, or rather, since I'd seen her 6 months ago in my new timeline. The stress of maintaining her perfect family image was taking its toll. "Good. The car is waiting," my father said. Appearing in the doorway, he didn't even look at me. He never did. In both lives, I'd been invisible to him, a reminder of his first wife, my mother, who'd died when I was 5. He'd remarried within a year, and Linda had brought Maya into our home like a conquering queen bringing her princess. For 15 years, I'd been the ugly stepsister in my own story. Maya got the best tutors, the best schools, the best everything. I got hand-me-downs and criticism. Maya's B+ was celebrated. My A was dismissed. When Maya wanted my room because it had better light, I was moved to the converted storage space in the attic. When I won the national mathematics competition, my father bought Maya a car to cheer her up because she'd come in 4th. I'd accepted it all with the quiet resignation of someone who'd been beaten down so thoroughly she couldn't remember what it felt like to stand up straight. Then Maya killed me, and I woke up 6 months earlier on my 18th birthday with every memory of my previous life burning in my mind like acid. The first thing I did was vomit. The second thing I did was cry. The third thing I did was start planning. Because I remembered everything. Every slight, every theft, every casual cruelty. But more importantly, I remembered the 6 months leading up to my death. I knew about Maya's affair with my boyfriend. I knew about the embezzlement scheme my stepmother was running through my father's company. I knew about the trust fund my real mother had left me, the one my father had been managing by funneling it into Linda's personal accounts. And I knew exactly how they were planning to kill me. In my previous life, I'd been too trusting, too desperate for approval. I'd ignored the signs, made excuses for their behavior, convinced myself that if I just tried harder, was better, was quieter, was smaller, they'd love me. This time, I knew the truth. They didn't want me to be better. They wanted me gone. The gala was being held at the Peninsula Hotel, the same glittering venue where I'd died. As we entered the ballroom, I felt the familiar weight of dread in my stomach, but I pushed it down. This time would be different. This time, I was ready. Maya immediately gravitated toward the bar, and I watched her carefully. In my past life, she'd ordered 2 glasses of champagne, poisoned one, and handed it to me with that perfect smile. The poison had been fast-acting, some kind of modified ricin that her pre-med boyfriend had helped her acquire. I'd been dead within minutes. My pre-med boyfriend, I should say. David Chen, who I'd genuinely loved, who'd told me he loved me, who'd been sleeping with Maya for 8 months before he helped her commit murder. I spotted him across the room, looking uncomfortable in his rented tuxedo. He hadn't seen me yet. Good. Iris! A voice called out, and I turned to see Ms. Patterson, one of my mother's oldest friends. She was one of the few people at these events who'd ever been kind to me. My dear, you look absolutely stunning. Is that a custom piece? It is, I said, embracing her warmly. From Chen Wei's new collection. Her eyes widened. Chen Wei was the designer in Hong Kong with the wait list that stretched for years. How did you manage that? I have my ways, I said, mysteriously. The truth was simpler. In my past life, I'd never accessed my mother's trust fund because I hadn't known it existed. This time, the day after I woke up, I'd hired a lawyer, a real one, not one of my father's associates, and discovered I was worth approximately 40 million Hong Kong dollars. My mother had been from old money, and she'd made sure her daughter would be taken care of. My father had been stealing from me for 13 years. The lawyer, Mr. Wong, had been thrilled to take my case. We'd started legal proceedings immediately, but I'd asked him to keep them quiet. I wanted my revenge to be perfect, and that meant waiting for exactly the right moment. I'd used a small portion of the trust, which I could access for educational and wellness purposes, to completely remake myself. Designer clothes, a personal trainer, a nutritionist, a therapist who specialized in abuse victims. I'd cut my hair, learned to do dramatic makeup, and most importantly, I'd grown a spine. The girl who'd died had been a ghost in her own life. The woman who'd come back was a phoenix. Iris, darling, Maya's voice cut through my conversation with Miss Patterson. She'd had 3 glasses of champagne already. I'd been counting, and her cheeks were flushed. Come take a photo with me. Sisters together. In my past life, I would have rushed over, desperate for any scrap of affection. Now I just smiled coolly. Maybe later, Maya. I'm catching up with Mrs. Patterson. Maya's face fell, then hardened. She wasn't used to me saying no. Nobody was. Actually, Ms. Patterson said, her eyes sharp, I'd love to hear about your university plans, Iris. Your mother always said you were brilliant. Something in my chest cracked open. Did she? Oh, yes. She used to say you had her mind for numbers. She was quite the mathematician herself, you know. Before she married your father, she was on track to be a professor at HKU. I hadn't known that. My father never talked about my mother, and Linda had systematically removed every photo, every trace of her from our home. I'd grown up with a ghost for a mother, a woman I couldn't remember and wasn't allowed to ask about. I'm planning to study mathematics at Cambridge, I said. It was true. I'd already been accepted in my previous life, but I'd turned it down because my father had said we couldn't afford it, and I'd believed him. This time, I knew I could pay for it myself. This time, I was leaving. Cambridge! How wonderful, Mrs. Patterson beamed. Your mother would be so proud. Across the room, I saw Maya whispering urgently to David. His face was pale, and he kept glancing in my direction. They were panicking. Good. In my past life, they'd been planning this for months. They knew the peninsula's security systems, knew the blind spots, knew exactly how to make my death look like an unfortunate accident or perhaps a suicide. But I'd changed the variables. I wasn't wearing the black dress. I wasn't alone. I wasn't the same broken girl they'd been planning to murder. I had excused myself from Ms. Patterson and made my way to the bathroom, knowing Maya would follow. She always did when she wanted to intimidate me in private. Sure enough, 30 seconds after I entered, she burst through the door, her face twisted with rage. What the fuck are you doing? She snarled. Using the bathroom? I replied, reapplying my lipstick in the mirror. My hand was steady. Is that a problem? You know what I mean. The dress, the attitude. You're embarrassing yourself. Am I? I turned to face her fully. Or am I embarrassing you? Her hand flew up and I caught her, wrist mid-swing. In my past life, she'd slapped me countless times and I'd never fought back. Now I held her arm firm, my fingers digging into her skin. Don't, I said softly. Touch me. You bitch. I'm not done, I continued, my voice calm and upon. You're going to go back out there and you're going to smile and you're going to pretend everything is fine because if you don't, I'm going to tell everyone about your little affair with David. I have photos, Maya. Lots of them. Time-stamped, date-stamped, extremely explicit photos. I didn't, actually. I hadn't needed them in this timeline because I'd cut David out of my life the moment I woke up. But Maya didn't know that. And the look of pure terror on her face told me she'd been sloppy. That evidence definitely existed somewhere. "You're lying," she whispered. "Am I?" I released her wrist and walked past her toward the door. "Try me." I left her standing there, shaking with rage and fear, and returned to the ballroom. My heart was pounding, but I felt electric, alive. This was what it felt like to fight back. The evening continued, and I worked the room like I'd been born to it. I talked to my father's business associates, charmed their wives, made connections. Several people commented on how different I seemed, how confident. One woman asked if I'd been away at finishing school. "Something like that," I said, smiling. Around 9 p.m., the speeches began. My father was being honored for his charitable contributions, which was laughable given that most of the money he donated came from my mother's trust. But everyone applauded, and Linda stood beside him looking like a proud wife, and Maya sat at their table looking like a dutiful daughter. I sat alone, as always, but this time, I'd chosen it. After the speeches, I watched Maya and David huddle in a corner. They were arguing. I could see it in their body language. David kept shaking his head, and Maya kept gesturing angrily. Finally, he nodded, and they separated. This was it. This was when they were supposed to make their move. David approached me first, his face a mask of false concern. "Iris, hey, you look different." "Thank you," I said pleasantly. "Can we talk outside?" In my previous life, I'd said yes. I'd followed him to the terrace, desperate to fix whatever was wrong, to understand why he'd been so distant lately. And Maya had followed with the poisoned champagne, and I'd drunk it, and I died believing the man I loved was trying to help me as the poison seized my throat. "No," I said simply. He blinked. "What?" I said no, David. "We broke up 3 months ago. We have nothing to talk about." "But you said—" He floundered, clearly thrown off script. "I just want to apologize for how things ended." "Apology noted and rejected," I said. "Now if you'll excuse me." I walked away, leaving him standing there. I could feel eyes on me, Maya's eyes, burning with fury and confusion. Their plan was falling apart, and they didn't know what to do. I made my way to the terrace anyway, but not alone. I'd asked Mr. Wong to meet me here along with someone else, a woman named Detective Sarah Lim, who specialized in financial crimes. "Miss Chen," Mr. Wong said, standing as I approached. "This is Detective Lim." "Thank you for coming," I said, shaking her hand. "Mr. Wong says you have information about embezzlement and fraud," Detective Lim said, getting straight to business. "I do." I pulled out my phone and opened the files I'd spent the last 6 months compiling. Bank statements, forged signatures, transfer records. In my previous life, I'd been too passive to dig into my father's management of my trust. This time, I'd hired a forensic accountant. The numbers told a damning story. My father and Linda had been systematically draining my trust for years, using the money to fund their lifestyle, Maya's education, and Linda's secret business ventures. They'd forged my signature on dozens of documents. They'd created fake expenses. They'd stolen nearly $10 million. "This is extensive," Detective Lim said, scrolling through the evidence. "You've done our job for us." "I want them arrested," I said. "Tonight, publicly." Mr. Wong shifted uncomfortably. "Iris, are you sure? Your father is a thief," I finished. "He's been stealing from me since I was 5 years old. He let his wife abuse me, let his stepdaughter torment me, and he never once protected me." "I don't care if it's public. I want it to be public." Detective Lim smiled grimly. "I'll make some calls." While we waited, I told them about Maya and David, about the plan to kill me. I had no proof, not in this timeline, but I planted the seeds. I believe my life may be in danger, I said carefully. My stepsister has been behaving erratically, and I've overheard conversations between her and her boyfriend about getting rid of the problem. I want it on record. Detective Lim took notes, her expression serious. We'll look into it. 40 minutes later, 4 police officers entered the ballroom. The music stopped. Conversations died mid-sentence. Everyone turned to watch as they approached my father's table. Jonathan Chen, Detective Lim said, her voice carrying across the silent room. You're under arrest for embezzlement, fraud, and theft. Linda Chen, you're also under arrest as an accessory. The ballroom erupted in chaos. My father stood, his face purple with rage and confusion. This is absurd. On what grounds? On the grounds that you've been stealing from your daughter's trust fund for 13 years, Detective Lim said crisply. We have extensive documentation. Linda grabbed Detective Lim's arm. You can't do this. Do you know who we are? I know exactly who you are, Mrs. Chen. You're under arrest. You have the right to remain silent. I watched from the terrace as they were handcuffed and led away. Maya was screaming, crying, demanding answers. David, had disappeared entirely, probably sensing that he was next. People were staring at me now. I walked back into the ballroom slowly, deliberately, my red dress catching the light like flames. Mrs. Patterson reached me first, her face full of concern and something else, pride maybe. Iris, my dear, are you all right? I'm perfect, I said, and I meant it. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. The media had a field day with the socialite embezzlement scandal. My father and Linda were denied bail due to the extensive evidence and the large amount of money involved. Maya had to drop out of university. Turned out her tuition had been paid with my stolen money. David tried to reach out, but I blocked him on everything. Later, I heard he'd transferred to a university in Canada, fleeing the scandal. The forensic investigation expanded, and they discovered even more crimes. Linda had been running a Ponzi scheme through her consulting business, and my father had been complicit. The stolen trust fund money was just the tip of the iceberg. I testified at their trial 3 months later. My father's lawyer tried to paint me as a vengeful, disturbed daughter, but the numbers didn't lie, and neither did the forged signatures, the fake documents, the paper trail of deception. How does it feel, the lawyer asked me during cross-examination, to destroy your own family? They destroyed themselves, I replied calmly. I just made sure everyone knew about it. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. My father got 12 years. Linda got 15. The Ponzi scheme victims had testified too, and their stories were heartbreaking. Maya wasn't charged with anything, but her reputation was destroyed. No one in Hong Kong society would touch her. As for David, Detective Lim had taken my concerns seriously. They'd searched his apartment and found research on various poisons, including ricin. They found text messages between him and Maya discussing the plan and making sure there was no evidence. They couldn't prove intent to murder, not without a crime being committed, but David lost his scholarship and was expelled from medical school. The university didn't want the liability. I sold my father's house. It legally became mine when he was convicted, as it had been purchased with my mother's money. I donated half the proceeds to a charity for abused children and used the rest to set up my new life. I left for Cambridge in September, and I never looked back. The trial had been cathartic, but it was the quiet moments after that truly healed me. Waking up in my Cambridge dorm room, making tea in my little kettle, walking to lectures through the historic streets, these were the victories that mattered. I was free. I made real friends, people who liked me for who I was, not who they wanted me to be. I joined the Mathematics Society and discovered I was actually brilliant. Without the constant criticism and sabotage, my natural talents flourished. Professors were impressed. I was impressed. I started therapy too, real therapy, working through the trauma of both lives. My therapist helped me understand that I hadn't deserved any of it. Not the abuse, not the neglect, not the murder attempt. I'd spent so long believing I was the problem that I'd forgotten I was actually the victim. But you're not a victim anymore, Dr. Sarah said during one session. You're a survivor. And more than that, you're thriving. She was right. I was thriving. In my second year at Cambridge, I met someone. His name was James, and he was studying physics. He was kind and funny, and he thought I was brilliant. When I told him about my family, the abbreviated, less traumatic version, he just held my hand and said, "I'm glad you got away." I didn't tell him about the rebirth, about dying and coming back. That was a secret I'd carry forever. But I didn't need to tell him everything to let him in. We took things slowly. After David's betrayal, across 2 lifetimes, I wasn't in a hurry to trust again. But James was patient. He never pressured me, never made me feel like I owed him anything. He just liked me. It was revolutionary. By my 3rd year, I'd published 2 papers on number theory that were getting attention in academic circles. One of my professors said I had the potential for a doctorate, maybe even a professorship eventually. "You have your mother's gift," he said, and I felt that same crack in my chest, that same desperate wish that she could see me. But maybe she could. Maybe somehow she knew. I graduated with first-class honors and stayed at Cambridge for my master's degree. James and I moved in together. Life was quiet and happy and normal, gloriously, wonderfully normal. I didn't hear from Maya or Linda or my father for 3 years. They were forbidden from contacting me as part of their sentencing. But Linda wrote me a letter from prison, which was forwarded through my lawyer. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity won. "Iris, I hope this letter finds you well. I wanted to apologize for my actions and the harm I caused you. I've had a lot of time to think about the choices I made, and I realize now how wrong I was. I was jealous of your mother and I took it out on you. You reminded me that Jonathan had loved someone before me and I couldn't handle it. I wanted Maya to have everything, and I convinced myself that taking from you was justified. I know now that it wasn't. I stole your childhood, your inheritance, and your sense of safety. I can never give those back, but I want you to know that I'm sorry. Maya asks about you sometimes. She's working at a restaurant now, trying to rebuild her life. She's sorry too, though she's too proud to say it. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it, but I wanted you to know that we know what we did was wrong. Linda, I read the letter 3 times, waiting to feel something. Anger, satisfaction, vindication, anything. But all I felt was empty, distant. These people had consumed so much of my life, had caused me so much pain, and now they were just irrelevant. I burned the letter and never responded. My father never wrote. I wasn't surprised. He'd never really seen me, even now. 5 years after the trial, I successfully defended my doctoral thesis. Dr. Iris Chen. It had a nice ring to it. James proposed the same day, in the garden behind our flat, with the ring that had belonged to his grandmother. I said yes without hesitation. We got married in a small ceremony with just close friends. Mrs. Patterson flew in from Hong Kong, and she cried when she saw me in my wedding dress. White, simple, nothing like the black dress I'd dyed in, or the red dress I'd worn to my rebirth. "Your mother would be so proud," she whispered, hugging me tight. "You became everything she hoped you'd be." At the reception, I gave a speech thanking everyone for their love and support. I didn't mention my father or Linda or Maya. They hadn't earned a place in this story. "I used to think," I said, looking at all the faces of people who genuinely cared about me, "that family was something you were born into. That blood meant loyalty. But I've learned that family is something you choose. It's the people who see you, who value you, who celebrate your victories instead of sabotaging them." I raised my glass. To chosen family, to second chances, to knowing when to walk away and when to fight back. And to red dresses, may we always have the courage to wear them. Everyone cheered and drank, and James kissed me, and I felt happier than I'd ever thought possible. That night, lying in bed next to my husband, I thought about both my lives, the before and the after, the death and the rebirth. In my first life, I'd worn black and faded into the background until I disappeared entirely. In my second life, I'd worn red and refused to be invisible. Maya had tried to steal my spotlight one last time by taking that black dress, but she didn't understand that the dress was a symbol of my old life, my old self. By taking it, she'd claimed my death, my victimhood, my weakness. I didn't want those things anymore. I'd left them behind when I chose red, when I chose myself. Sometimes, late at night, I wondered if I'd actually died and been reborn, or if I'd just had a complete psychological break and hallucinated the entire thing as a way to process my trauma. Maybe I'd never been poisoned. Maybe I just hit rock bottom and my mind had created an elaborate fantasy to give me the strength to fight back. It didn't matter. Whether it was magic or madness or something else entirely, it had saved me. I'd saved myself. 7 years after the trial, I was offered a position as an assistant professor at Oxford. It was a dream job, the kind of opportunity my mother would have loved. I accepted immediately. We moved to Oxford, bought a small house with a garden, adopted a dog named Newton. Life was peaceful. I published papers, taught brilliant students, came home to a man who loved me. Sometimes I ran into people from Hong Kong. It's a small world when you're in academia. They'd ask about my father, and I'd say, "We're not in contact," and change the subject. Most people were polite enough not to push. One day, about 10 years after everything happened, I was giving a lecture at an international mathematics conference in London. After my talk, a young woman approached me during the coffee break. "Dr. Chen, I just wanted to say thank you. Your work on elliptic curves is brilliant." "Thank you," I said, smiling. "Are you a graduate student?" "Yes, at Imperial. I'm starting my PhD next year." She hesitated, then added, "I also wanted to thank you for being brave. I read about your case when I was 16, and it helped me escape my own abusive family situation. You showed me it was possible to fight back." My throat tightened. "What's your name?" Emily Zhao." "Emily, I'm so glad you got out. And I'm even gladder that you're here doing mathematics, living your life. That's the real victory. Not the revenge, but the survival, the thriving." She nodded, her eyes bright with tears. "I'm wearing red today," she said, gesturing to her red blazer. "Because of you." After she left, I had to step outside for a moment. I stood in the London sunshine, thinking about that scared girl I'd been, the one who'd died in a black dress. Thinking about all the Emily Zayos in the world, trapped in families that hurt them. If my story had helped even one person escape, then maybe everything, the pain, the betrayal, the death, had been worth it. That evening, I called Mrs. Patterson. We talked every few months now, and she'd become the closest thing I had to a mother. "How's the conference?" she asked. "Good, exhausting. I met a young woman who said my story helped her leave an abusive home." "Of course it did, dear. You're an inspiration." "I don't feel very inspiring. I just did what I had to do." "That's what makes it inspiring," she said gently. "You didn't have any guarantee it would work. You just had courage and determination. And look at you now, Dr. Chen, professor at Oxford, married to a wonderful man. You built a whole new life." "I did, didn't I?" I smiled. "Hey, can I ask you something about my mother?" "Anything." "Was she happy before she died?" There was a long pause. "Yes," Mrs. Patterson said finally. "She was very happy. She loved your father, or at least she loved who she thought he was, and she absolutely adored you. You were her whole world, Iris. She used to say you were her greatest achievement." I wiped my eyes. "I wish I remembered her." "She remembered you, and she left you that trust fund because she wanted to make sure you'd always be taken care of. In a way, she's still protecting you, even now." That night, I dreamed of my mother for the first time in years. She was young and beautiful, with my same dark hair and sharp eyes. We were sitting in a garden, drinking tea, and she was teaching me about numbers. "Mathematics is about finding patterns," she said, "about understanding the underlying structure of things. Life is like that too. Sometimes you have to step back, see the whole equation before you can solve it." "What if the equation is rigged against you?" I asked. She smiled. "Then you change the variables." When I woke up, James was still sleeping beside me, and Newton was curled up at the foot of the bed. Sunlight streamed through the curtains. It was going to be a beautiful day. I got up, made coffee, and sat at my desk to work on my latest research paper. The work was challenging but satisfying, the kind of problem that required patience and creativity to solve. Around noon, my phone buzzed with an email. It was from Maya. I stared at it for a long moment, my finger hovering over the delete button. But curiosity again won out. Iris, I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I know I don't have the right to contact you, but I'm writing anyway because I need to say this. I'm sorry. I'm so, so sorry for everything I did to you, for every cruel word, every theft, every moment of pain. You deserved better, and I gave you worse. Mom is out of prison now. She's living in a small flat in Kowloon, working as an accountant. Dad gets out in 2 years. We don't talk much. There's not much to say. I've been in therapy for 5 years. At first, I went because it was court mandated, but then I kept going because I realized how fucked up I was, how jealous and insecure and cruel. My therapist says I projected all my own inadequacies onto you. She's right. You were always smarter, kinder, more talented. I couldn't handle it. So I tried to break you down to my level. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know what I did is unforgivable. I just wanted you to know that I understand now what I couldn't understand then. You were never my competition. You were my sister, and I destroyed that relationship because I was too small and scared to appreciate it. I saw that you're at Oxford now. Professor Chen, I'm happy for you, genuinely. You deserved every success. I'm nobody, and I'll probably always be nobody. But I'm trying to be a better nobody. I hope you're happy. I hope you have everything you ever wanted. Maya. I read the email twice, then closed my laptop. The thing was, I believed her. I believed she was sorry. People could change, could grow, could realize they'd been monsters and decide to be better. But that didn't mean I had to let her back into my life. Some bridges, once burned, should stay ashes. I deleted the email and went back to my research. That weekend, James and I drove to the coast. We walked along the beach, Newton bounding ahead of us, and I felt the sea wind in my hair and the sun on my face and my husband's hand in mine. "What are you thinking about?" James asked. "How lucky I am," I said. "Luck had nothing to do with it. You fought for this life." "Maybe both," I conceded. "Lucky enough to get a second chance. Strong enough to take it." We walked in comfortable silence for a while, watching the waves crash against the shore. In the distance, a woman was wearing a red dress, the fabric whipping in the wind. She looked free. I thought about the girl I'd been, the one who'd faded into the background in her black dress, the one who'd been so desperate for love she'd accepted crumbs and called it a feast, the one who'd died on a marble floor alone and betrayed. She was gone now. She'd been gone for 10 years. In her place was someone stronger, someone who'd learned that family was a choice, not an obligation. Someone who'd learned that survival was its own kind of revenge, but thriving was better. Someone who wore red and refused to fade. Later that night, back at home, I stood in my closet looking at my clothes. I had plenty of black dresses now, practical, professional, appropriate. But I also had red ones, crimson and scarlet and ruby and wine. I pulled out a red dress, held it up to the light. It wasn't the same one from that night at the peninsula. I'd burned that one years ago, a symbolic funeral for my old life. But it was similar, bold, unapologetic, unforgettable. "Wearing that to something?" James asked, coming up behind me. "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe I'll just keep it as a reminder." "Of what?" "That I'm not afraid of being seen anymore." He kissed my temple. "Good. You're worth seeing." I hung the dress back up carefully, a talisman, a promise to myself. The next morning, I went back to work. I had lectures to give, research to complete, students to mentor. I had a life to live, a good life, a life I'd fought for and earned. And if sometimes in quiet moments I thought about that other timeline, that other life where I'd worn black and died, well, that was okay. It was part of my story, the dark chapter that made the happy ending meaningful. Because here's the thing about rebirth, whether it's literal or metaphorical, you have to die first. You have to lose everything to understand what's worth keeping. You have to fade into the background before you can step into the light. Maya had borrowed my black dress, and in doing so, she'd claimed my death. Fine, let her have it. Let her have the victimhood, the tragedy, the fade into irrelevance. I'd chosen red. I'd chosen life. I'd chosen myself. And I'd never looked back. Years continued to pass, each one better than the last. I got tenure at Oxford. published a book that won awards, mentored dozens of students who went on to brilliant careers. James and I talked about having kids, maybe adopting. One afternoon, 15 years after my rebirth, I was invited to give a keynote speech at a conference on women in STEM. The organizer mentioned they wanted me to talk not just about my research, but about my journey. "You're an inspiration," she said. "Coming from abuse, losing your family, building a whole new life. People need to hear that story." I agreed, though I was nervous. I'd never really talked publicly about what happened. The conference was in Cambridge, oddly enough, full circle. I stood on that stage in front of hundreds of people wearing, yes, a red dress. And I told my story. The abuse, the theft, the attempted murder. I glossed over the rebirth part. The revenge, the legal battle, the escape. "I'm not going to tell you that revenge felt good," I said. "Honestly, it felt necessary. It felt like justice, but what felt good, what feels good is this. Standing here, having built a life on my own terms. That's the real victory." The applause was thunderous. Afterwards, dozens of people came up to me. Women, mostly. But some men, too. They told me their stories of abuse, of escaping, of surviving. They thanked me for being brave, for speaking out, for showing them it was possible. I hugged strangers and exchanged email addresses and promised to stay in touch. And I felt, for the first time, that maybe my suffering had a purpose beyond just my own survival. Maybe it could help light the way for others. That night, James and I walked through Cambridge, past the college where I'd lived as a student, past the library where I'd spent countless hours studying. "I'm proud of you," he said, "for being willing to be vulnerable like that." It felt right, I said. Like I was closing a loop. "Do you think you'll ever forgive them? Your family?" I considered the question seriously. "No," I said finally. "And I don't think I need to. Forgiveness is for when someone deserves a second chance. They had 18 years to treat me like a human being, and they chose cruelty every single time. I don't owe them anything, not even forgiveness." "Fair enough." But, I added, "I'm not angry anymore. I'm not haunted by them. They're just people who hurt me once, a long time ago. They don't get space in my head anymore." That's its own kind of victory. "Yeah," I agreed. It really is." We walked in silence for a bit, and then James said, "You know what I think? I think you're the bravest person I've ever met." "I'm not brave. I was just cornered." "Bravery isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing to fight anyway. And you fought like hell." I leaned into him, feeling the warmth of his body, the solid reality of this life I'd built. "We should go home," I said. "Newton's probably wondering where we are." "Always thinking about that dog." "He's a very good dog." We took the train back to Oxford, and I spent the journey looking out the window at the English countryside rolling past. Green fields and old stone walls and cloudy skies. It was beautiful in a quiet, understated way. Nothing like Hong Kong with its neon lights and towering skyscrapers. I didn't miss Hong Kong. I didn't miss anything about my old life. When we got home, Newton greeted us with his usual enthusiasm, and I made tea while James made dinner. We ate together, talking about our days, making plans for the weekend. Ordinary domestic happiness. This was what I'd fought for, not the dramatic revenge or the courtroom victory, though those had been necessary steps, but this. The quiet evening with someone who loved me, the work I found meaningful, the safety of knowing I'd never be hurt like that again. That night, I had the dream again. My mother in the garden, teaching me about numbers. "You changed the variables," she said, smiling. "I'm proud of you, Iris." "I wish you were here." "I am here. I'm in every equation you solve, every student you teach, every moment you choose yourself. That's the legacy I left you, not just money, but the courage to claim your own life." "Thank you," I whispered. "Thank you for surviving. Thank you for thriving. Thank you for wearing red." I woke up with tears on my face but a smile on my lips. The sun was rising, painting the bedroom in shades of gold and rose. James was still sleeping, his face peaceful. Newton lifted his head from his dog bed, tail wagging hopefully. I got up, let the dog out, made coffee. The morning stretched ahead of me, full of possibility. I thought about Maya in her black dress, my black dress, trying to steal my spotlight one last time. I thought about how she'd faded into the background instead, while I'd stepped into the light wearing red. I thought about choice and courage and the person I'd become. And then I stopped thinking about them at all. Because that's the thing about moving on, about truly healing. Eventually, the people who hurt you stop being the main characters in your story. They become footnotes, minor antagonists in someone else's triumph. My story wasn't about them anymore. It was about me, Dr. Iris Chen, mathematician, professor, wife, survivor, victor. It was about the life I'd built from ashes. It was about wearing red and refusing to fade. And it was finally beautifully my own.